Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Metzia daf Mem Daled. There's a study guide for today, and I will tell you, since tomorrow is Shabbat, I recommend you, if you're learning on Shabbat, print the study guide for tomorrow's daf. It's a bit of a complicated daf, and the charts, hopefully for people who like charts, they will help you understand the flow of the daf. Today's daf is sponsored by Ariella and Michael Radwin in honor of Sivan's bat mitzvah this coming Shabbat. Mazal tov to Sivan. May you lead a life of Torah and maasim tovim, and may you someday be blessed to stand under the chuppah. Mazal tov. Okay, we're going to get started and finish the third chapter, and then we'll move on to the fourth chapter with a whole different section of Bava Metzia beginning. So we're going to start with the Mishna at the bottom of Mem Gimel Amud Bet. We've been talking about shlichut yad, about someone who uses or intends to use, and that's part of what we're going to discuss today. At what point do you become sholech yad b'pikadon? So I'm watching your item. It's already in my house. It's not like I'm a thief that stole something from your house and took it to my own house, where it's very clear that I'm a thief. At this point, I decide that this item that I'm watching of yours, I'm just going to keep for myself and keep it as my own, or use it, or partially use it, or borrow, right? We had all these different distinctions. So the question is, at what point do I become sholech yad? What do I have to do in order for us to say, this person was sholech yad b'pikadon? So the Mishnah starts off with a machloket between Beit Shamai and Beit Hillel. We'll also end today with a machloket between Beit Shamai and Beit Hillel about a totally different topic. Hachoshev l'shloch yad b'pikadon. What if I just intend to use it? I think to myself, that's really nice. I'll keep that for myself. Or I'll take some wine from that barrel. I want to take a glass. But I just think it. Okay, now, first of all, thinking, okay, in the Gemara or Mishna, sometimes thinking comes up. Like, for example, pigul is an act of just thinking alone. That comes up in the Torah. Pigul is to basically when the Kohen has the wrong thoughts while doing the sacrifice. It ruins the sacrifice just by thought alone. Now, in many other sugyot, it comes up that thinking isn't real, right? Hirhurim mutarin, right? Our thoughts are okay. In other words, there's things we could do with our thoughts as long as we don't as long as we don't act on them, as long as we don't express them. What does thinking actually mean? So there's a big machloket, for example, by Pigul, and it's the same machloket here between the commentaries. When we say thinking, what do we mean by thinking? Do we mean thinking really just in my head? Or do we mean expressing it? And Rashi says here, I want you to read Rashi, it's really important. Amar bifnei edim. Thinking does not mean just thinking according to Rashi, and it's the same thing by Pigul. It means you expressed it, in this case, in front of witnesses. I don't remember the witnesses come up in Pigul, but it had to have been expressed. Otherwise, it's really nothing. Okay? Rashi thinks that a thought in your head alone is irrelevant. Even in sugyot, where even though normally even saying doesn't necessarily mean anything, actions speak louder than words. But there's certain unique cases, like Hoshev yad b'pikadon, according to Beit Shamai anyway, Beit Hillel doesn't think so. And Pigul, for example, where expressing something without acting upon it is actually forbidden. But other commentaries take this word thinking very seriously and say, no, just in your thoughts alone, you don't actually have to express it for it to be an issue. Again, it's only going to be an issue according to Beit Shamai, which you haven't seen yet. But okay, that's a very interesting machloket because it also appears in other sugyot as well. And Rashi is consistent across the board. So you just think it, or you say it in front of witnesses, whichever commentary we take. Beit Shamai omrim chayav, uBeit Hillel omrim eno chayav ad sheyishlach bo yad. So Beit Shamai says you're obligated. That's enough. Beit Hillel says no, you have to take action. If you didn't take action, then you're not liable. Shenemau, and here Beit Hillel, the Mishna is a little imbalanced. Beit Hillel brings a pasuk, Beit Shamai doesn't. Although when we get to the Gemara, the first thing they'll do is bring a braita where we have Beit Shammai's pasuk as well, and then we have a ping pong between them. What do you do with this pasuk? So Beit Hillel's pasuk is this: Shenema im lo shalach yado b'melech, right? You have to take an oath that you did not do shlichut yad. Now, what does shlichut yad mean? Sending out your hand. What is that if not an action? Hand is not your brain thinking, right? Your thoughts. It's an action. So Beit Hillel says it has to be an action. Now we're going to go to another issue, which is hita et hachavi. Once you get to the action part, so now you tilt the barrel and you want to take out a glass of wine. This is that middle case we talked about, where you don't want to use the whole barrel. You just want to take a glass of wine. So you tilt the barrel and natzali menu revid. And you took a revid of wine. And then after, what happens? Some onus, unexpected damage happens. That's the whole thing. Once you're shalech boyad, you become obligated in onus, which you're not obligated in before that, unless you're a shoel, and we're not talking about a shoel here. Well, since all you did was take a revi'it from there, or that was your intent to take a revi'it, so since you didn't actually, we'll see in a minute, the opposite case, but you didn't lift the barrel, you didn't do any sort of action to the whole barrel, all you did was tilt it, take out what you wanted, then you're only obligated for the revi'it of wine that you wanted to take from there. That's the only thing you have to replace. Okay, here it could be, you took it and then you're not responsible for any more than that. But but if you lifted it and then you took a revi'it out, and then it breaks, because you lifted the entire barrel with the intent to use it, even though you weren't planning to use the whole thing, doesn't matter. You lifted it. That we always talk about kinyan. We'll talk later also today about kinyanim, acquiring things. Lifting is one of the ways you acquire something. So you already become liable for the entire barrel, even though your whole intent was just to take one glass. Okay, so the first thing we're going to deal with is machloket Beit Shamai Beit Hillel in the Gemara, and what the source for each opinion is, even though we know Beit Hillel. Minani, where do we get this from? The Tanu Rabbanan, we're going to quote a braita that has a more elaborate version of the discussion that ensued between Beit Shamai and Beit Hillel. The Tanu Rabbanan, al kol dvar pesha. This is the pasuk after it says, you have to take an oath. Then it says, on any dvar pesha, blah, 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 blah. Now, dvar pesha, right? Any kind of misuse. Beit Shamai omrim melamedet shechayav al machshava k'maaser. Where does he get this machshava k'maaser? And this, by the way, supports Rashi a little bit. From the word al kol davar. Now, you could just say it means on anything. Anything means even thoughts. But most of the commentaries think davar, dibur, right? Davar and dibur are the same root. Dibur is speech. On any speech, even if you just say something, as opposed to the yad, right? There's the dibur with your mouth and there's the yad with your hand. Even if you just speak it, that's enough, or think it possibly, that's enough. You have to actually use physical act, do physical action. So Beit Shammai says, I'll call Dvar Pesha. What are you going to say to that? Okay, right now, no one's really said much, except, what about my pasuk? And the other one says, well, what about my pasuk? So what does Beit Hillel do with al kol dvar pesha be'emet? What are they going to do with that? Sheyachol ein li elahu. Here we learn a different halacha, which is another exception to the rule. In other words, again, we had exception number one in this case is usually, again, this is only according to Beit Shammai, but usually, and each one's going to come up with a unique exception. According to Beit Shammai, usually you're only obligated for actions. In this case, you're going to be obligated for your words as well, right? As opposed to, other than the world of nidarim and shvuah, where it's all about your words. But in general, when we're talking about damages and actions and all that, it's usually your actions, although we will get later in the next chapter into ona'at dvarim, which is insulting people and embarrassing people with words, which is also a whole other issue, which obviously you're liable with words. But here we're talking about that you wanted to steal something. So just by thinking or saying you're going to steal, that's not really stealing. Again, it's obviously different than if I think to steal something that's in your house. Here, I'm thinking to steal something that's in my own house. Right. And then the point is, I then become liable for onus as well. So now they say, what can you learn Beit Hillel from the words I'll call Dvar Pesha if you don't think it comes to mean your words, your act, or your thoughts? She'achol ein li elahu. So you might have thought, if I have this item in my house and I want to steal it, and in order for me to be obligated on shlichut yad, that I now become liable for unexpected damages, then you might have thought it's only if I myself take this glass of wine out, okay? As opposed to what? Amar la'avdo u'lishlucho minayin. What if I told my messenger or my servant or slave to go get it for me? Now, normally, what will we say? If you tell your slave or your servant or your messenger to go do something for you, that's a sin, like go steal from your house, and they do it, what happens? Who's liable? Not me. They're liable. That's a very famous sugya. Ein shaliach lidvar avirah. There's no such thing as sending an agent to do a sin. They have their own mind. They know they're doing something wrong. They shouldn't listen to you. And if they listen to you, well, right, divrei arav, divrei mishamim. There's God telling them don't do it. There's me telling you do it. You're supposed to listen to God, so it's your fault. But in this case, it's not. It's a unique exception to the rule. There's some other ones like Me'ila that we talked about, right? If I send you to misuse my consecrated money and you do exactly what I say, I'm the one responsible. Only if you change from it, you become responsible. But if you actually do, so there's a few unique exceptions, and this is one of them, according to Beit Hillel. So how do you know that your Eved or Shaliach, if they do it, the sin is on you who sent them? Talmud Lomar, I'll call Dvar Pesha, because it says on any kind of misdoing, which means even if I send someone else to do it, I'm still going to be liable. Hitai tachavit. So now we get back to the Mishnah. You tilted the barrel to take a revi'it, right? You took a revi'it and then the rest of the barrel broke. You're not liable. I'm a rabba, lo shanu ela nishbara. By the way, this is only if it broke. But aval hichmitza. Let's say I took out some wine and then the wine went bad. Now, why did the wine go bad? Well, I caused the wine to go bad. And this, by the way, takes it out of laws of shmirah. It puts it into laws of damages. I basically damaged the wine because we all know when there's more oxygen, right, more air in there, the oxygen, it causes the wine to spoil. So, mishalemet kula, then I have to pay for the whole barrel. Because by my taking out the wine, we'll see it in the words of the Gemara, my taima, geri didi hu da'hanele, my own arrows ruined it, right? That means my direct actions caused it to break. Before then, I just tilted it, and then later it broke from nothing that had anything to do with my action. It was just onus, and the whole point is, well, once you're sholech yad, then I'm chayav and onus. At this point, I wasn't chayav and onus for the whole thing because I didn't even lift it, so I was only chayav for the revi that I took out. But if it's spoiled on account of my actions, because now there's more air in the barrel, and that caused the wine to spoil quicker, well, then it's my fault, and I have to pay for the whole barrel. That's a side point, right? Because that already moves us into damages away from laws of shomrim, of watching. Last section for here. If I lifted it and then took out, I'm right, then I'm liable for the whole thing. So I'm a Shmuel. Now it said there, I lifted it, v'natal, and I took a revi'it out. I'm a Shmuel, lo natal mamash. By the way, you don't actually, let's say I lifted it, and then you called me to do something else, and I put it back down, and I said, I'll come back later to get my glass of wine, and I never took out my glass of wine. Now the Mishnah says, higbiha v'natali min revi'it. I took it out. Comes Shmuel and he says, even if I didn't take it out, ela kevan shehigbiha litol, even if I lifted it up with the intent to take, that's already considered an action. Afal pisha lo natal, even if I didn't take it. So now they say, sounds from here that Shmuel holds that shlichut yad doesn't need to be depleted, right? Reduced in any way, because here I didn't reduce it in any way, right? I didn't do anything. I didn't use anything. They say, no. Amre, look, no. Here, it's a different reason. Shamai hacha denichale letehave hachavit kula basis laha revi'it. Just for the same reason we said before about the process that happens when there's air in the barrel, it ruins the rest. If I lifted this to take the glass of wine and then I left the wine inside, okay? Why did I leave the wine? Leaving the wine inside is actually good for me. And actually the rest of that barrel is serving me right now. Why? Because my glass of wine is staying longer. It's being served by the rest of the barrel. The rest of the barrel is helping my wine to keep fresh. So in that sense, I'm actually using the entire barrel. Okay, so that already is what makes me obligated here. By Rav Ashi, so Rav Ashi asked kind of funny question and an interesting way to end the Masechet because we're going to end with the perek, the chapter with a teku. Okay, we don't know. Let's try to apply this case to another case. I pick up a wallet. Okay, I'm watching your wallet. And then I pick it up to take money out of it. Mahu. And then I don't take the money. I leave the money that I plan to steal in the wallet. Do we say, the wine needs the rest of the wine, right? My glass of wine needs the rest of the wine in order to keep it fresh without spoiling. Aval zuze mintar. But the money is not more protected because it's in the wallet. Oh, Dilma, or maybe you would say, shani nitiruta de arnaki nitiruta de dinar. Okay, we all know this. Where is your money most protected? In your wallet. Because if you leave money laying around or in your pocket or something like that, loose money, it could fall, it could get lost, all sorts of things could happen to it. So your money is actually better protected in the wallet, possibly. It's a little different than with the wine. It's not because we're worried it's going to get spoiled, but we're worried it'll get lost. Money is actually much better with other money. So which one do we say? to which I already told you, we're going to end with a teku. We don't know. This question stands. We don't have a good answer. And with that, Hadran alacha mafkid. Okay, before we move on to the next chapter, I want to very, very briefly, because we need a lot of time for the second part of today's daf, but I want to briefly just summarize what we've done so far. We started with Shnai mochazim b'talid and fights over mamonot, who belongs to who, and when you find items or even in a sale. And then we got from there to all sorts of lost items and what do? You announce all that. From there, we got into Dinei Shomrim. Okay, third chapter, Parak HaMafkid, all about Shomrim, all about watching other people's items, what your level of responsibility is. What if you decide to steal it? When is it considered stealing? What's your level of responsibility at that point? When is it considered return? Because again, all the laws of stealing are somewhat different, right? And a lot of this chapter was similar to things we learned at the end of Bava Kama. It's a lot of crossover when we learned about theft. Now we're starting the second section of Bava Metzia, I would call it. I would say that was sort of one section. The second section of the next two chapters, we're really going to talk about, we're going to start with currencies and all sorts of interesting things about currency. From there, we're going to get into ona'ah, which is overcharging people or undercharging or some sort of, big change in the market price. Okay. And then from there, we're going to get to ona'at dvarim, which is a fascinating topic about insulting people and libel, slander, all that, okay, which is also forbidden by Torah law. And then we're going to get into Rebbi, interest. Okay, and today's daf will actually reference not ona'at dvarim, not words, but we will reference ona'ah in money and also interest. And these are topics that are going to come up in the next while. Okay, what you need to know background for this stuff is that when you acquire an item, okay, and we'll get to this whole machloket Daf Mem Zayin in a bit about whether money can purchase an item or not. Okay, what does this mean? When we do kinyanim, generally we say you have to pull, lift, pass, some sort of action to what? To the item you're purchasing. Okay, which means when you purchase movable items, it's not acquired by money. Okay, what does that mean? If I pay you money for something, it's not mine. I don't own it yet. Okay. Which means a few things. Number one, if I want to change my mind, I could change my mind. If you want to change your mind, you could change your mind. I could have paid for an item, and then I can easily change my mind about it. Okay, according to halacha. Now, there's a machloket whether money actually is a kinyan by Torah law, but the rabbis change that. Okay, or even by Torah law, it's not. But right now, for our purposes, it doesn't matter. We'll get to that whole machloket soon, Mem Zayin. But right now, I want to focus on the practical. If I give you money for something, right? I pay for something online, it's not mine yet. So if it gets lost on the way, right? I ordered something recently and it never showed up, right? And I even had trouble reaching the company. I finally had to call the credit card company to cancel the order. Finally, of course, the company reached out to me, although I still haven't really heard from them. But anyway, the point is I paid money, but it's not mine. So if I don't receive it yet, you have to replace it basically, okay? So if let's say it gets burned in your house, you give me some item and it gets burned, right? We'll get to that, right? And then they're burned, well, you have to supply me with new ones, okay? And that's part of the reason why Rabbi Yochanan switches the rabbinic law, but we'll get into that all later. So if I pay money, there's no kinyan, which means we can both change our minds, which means that although we'll see today, there's an opinion that that's not fully true, but we'll get to that. But that's a side opinion, not the main opinion. And it means that you assume responsibility for that item till I receive it. But if I pulled an item, okay, but I didn't give you the money yet. Okay, so you gave me the item I was buying, and I said I'll pay you tomorrow. At that point, when I pull that item or lift it or whatever I do to it, the item is mine. The sale is complete. If something happens to the money, let's say, that I'm supposed to pay you, I have to replace it, right? I have to give you money for sure. And no one can change their mind about it. It's a done deal. So that's the basics. So money doesn't work. Now, the whole big question of our Mishna is, what is money? And what if so we know what money is, right? Money, coins, dollar bills, right? All that kind of stuff. In those days, there was zahav, kesef, nechoshet, right? There were prutot of nechoshet. We've already talked about these different currencies. There were silver coins. There were gold coins. So all of those theoretically are currency, except what if I'm buying silver for gold? I'm buying coins for silver, okay? Copper coins for silver. Which one is the coin? Which one is what we're going to call the commodity? Okay, so the Gemara is going to call them tiva, which is from the language of matbea, which is a coin. That's the currency. And which is the peirot, which is like the produce, what I'm purchasing. So when we compare one to the other, so we take money, but money compared to itself, well, if no money can buy money, right? Money can't buy money. Well, one of them has to be the one I'm purchasing. So which one is it? So we're going to read our Mishnah, and then we're going to hear that there was a bit of a different version of our Mishnah before this version of the Mishnah about the first case. So it's called Perek HaZahav. This is how you can remember, okay? And it could have been called Perek HaKesef if we had gone by an earlier version of Rebbi, but it's called Perek HaZahav because it starts off, HaZahav koneh et HaKesef. Okay, this is you'll have to understand what this phrase means. When we're trading silver for gold, if you pull the silver, okay, you do an act of kinyan on the gold. If you pull the gold, then it's a done deal because the gold is a commodity compared to silver. Silver is the coin, okay? Silver is the currency. But akesef eino koneh et hazahav. If you pull the silver, then it's not a done deal because the silver is the money. Okay, that goes hand in hand. Okay, now we're going to compare nechoshet to kesef. There's a study guide today, by the way, which shows some of these things. Ha-nechoshet koneh et hakesef, hakesef eino koneh et ha-nechoshet. So silver, we're now going to see. Silver works both as compared to something more expensive than it, like gold, and also compared to something less expensive than it, which is copper. Because silver, according to this Mishnah, is the main currency. Okay, now we're going to use terminology to describe these things. One thing is that gold, there's an issue of importance. What's more important? Now, gold would obviously be the highest there, but it's also what's used the most as currency. Okay, so silver is going to be higher than gold in that sense. And the question is, if we're going to see different versions, what pulls it more? That it's more important and more valuable, or that it's a much more used currency? And this also, by the way, could change with time, right? This could be that, and Professor Farber talks about this, that perhaps the difference in Rebbi that we'll see was a difference in his time period, the use of currency changed. And which currency was the main one and which was the, right, and where this is very much affected by what the common thing is. I'm not sure why someone wrote in the chat, no, Mashicha, this is Mashicha. If you pull the gold, then the act is done. If you pull the silver, it's not. Okay, so now, when we say koneh, it means acquire by an act of kinyan, whether it's mashicha, hagvav, lifting it, anything like that. Ma'ot haraot konot et hayafot, hayafot enan konot et haraot. Okay, this is obvious now. If you have bad coins and good coins, obviously, which is the currency? The good coins. If you're trading good coins for bad coins, right, let's have 10 good coins and I'm trading them for 20 bad coins. So when I pull the bad coins, that will be the act because the bad coins are the commodity and the good coins are obviously the currency. If you pull the good coins, that obviously won't affect the kinyan. Asimon konet matbea, matbea no konet asimon. Okay, asimon in our day, or we don't really have them anymore, but they were, right, these phone coins that didn't have any. What's the difference between them and regular coins? They have no form on them, no tzura, no picture, no image. Okay, whereas in those days it's the same thing. The coins all had images on them. That gives them value. The asimon is just the value of the item itself without the form on it. That's much less used as a currency. So again, asimon compared to matbea will be the commodity. Matbea, konet asimon, because the matbea is the currency. Mitaltalin konet matbea, matbea, konet mitaltalin. This is what we said before. A movable item is the commodity, obviously, and the coin doesn't affect the kinyan with metaltalin. Kol metaltalin. I'm skipping the word zaklal. Some people have it, some people don't. Kol metaltalin konim zeh. If we're trading, we're bartering a cow for a donkey. We had that case, remember? So one person pulls the cow, the donkey's already in the ownership of the other person, even if it's still in my domain, right? But it's yours. Just happens to be in my domain. Ketzad. So now we're just describing, which I already told you. If you pulled, here comes the Mashicha, you pulled the commodity and I didn't, right, but didn't give the money yet, can't change your mind anymore. It's too late. Neither me nor you. But if you gave me the money and didn't take the payroll yet, we could change our mind. Aval, here's a big aval. Amru, they said, even though you pay me money, you can change your mind, I can change my mind. But they said, Misha parami anshe dor mabul midor aflaga, huatili parami misha no me b'diburo. The person or the God really who punished the people of the generation of the flood and the generation of those who build the tower, the Dor Flaga that tried to build a tower up to the heavens, God will punish you as well if you don't stick to your word. In other words, if we made a deal and you renege on the deal, technically, halachically, it's okay, but you'll be cursed. Okay, now either they view this as an actual curse or they're just trying to scare people and don't do this. Rabbi Shimon has a different approach. I said we get to a different approach. If you pay me money for something, you can't change your mind anymore. I can change my mind. The one who has the money in hand, meaning the one who received the money, even though there's really no kinyan, there's only really no kinyan for me. For you, there's obviously a kinyan because you gave me the money. You showed complete intent to acquire this item. That's sufficient to say you can no longer change your mind. Only I can change my mind. Okay, we don't hold this way, but it's a very interesting opinion. Now we're going to start off with the fact that Rebbi had different versions of his Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Berei. Rebbi taught this Mishnah to Rabbi. Okay, Rebbi is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Put together the Mishnah. He taught this Mishnah to his son. It's nice to think of, what we're learning right now. Rebbi taught his son also. Hazahav koneta kesef. Right? I mean, all this stuff he probably taught his son, but here you see it explicitly. Zahav acquires money. Okay, that's what we saw. Acquires silver. Okay, the zahav is the commodity. The silver is the coin, the currency. Amarle, Rebbi, he says to his father, he calls him Rebbi. Okay, by the way, the Rama quotes that in laws of respect of your rabbi, that if your father's your rabbi, instead of calling him father, Abba, you have to call him Rebbi. And he even has, in the parentheses, it says, Perek HaZahav, okay? It comes right out of here. Shani talanu b'yaldutecha ha-kesef koneh et hazahav. V'tachzor v'tishne lanu b'ziknutecha hazahav koneh et ha-kesef. It's unclear whether he's asking this as a question or he's just kind of stating it because we don't really deal with this as a question anymore. We just take it as a fact. But you taught us when you were younger that kesef is koneh zahav. That zahav is the currency and silver is the commodity. And now you're changing and you're telling us the opposite. Okay, so again, question maybe not question. Either which way, the Gemara goes off and says, now we're going to say, b'yaldute ma'asavar b'ziknute ma'asavar. What was his logic for thinking it when he was young? And not because he was young, but why did he originally think that zahav was the commodity, gold was the commodity, and then why did he change it later to say silver is the commodity? Again, not why did he change it, but what was his logic for thinking that second position? B'yaldute sabah. Dahava is zahav, because Dalet and Zayin switch in Aramaic. So it's basically saying zahava. Dahava dechashiv havetiva. Well, zahav is the most important because it's worth the most. So because it's worth the most, that must be the currency. Haspedelo chashiv haveperi. And the silver is less important, so it's all about importance. Doesn't matter what they use in the shuk, it's all about importance. V'kana peri the tiva. And then again, the commodity that acquires the money, not the money that acquires the commodity. Biziknute savar, and when he was older, he thought, moving now to Amabet, haspa de charif have tiva, dava de lo charif have a peri. Charif usually means sharp, but what it means here is, charif means it's what's most commonly used. So then he said, but kesef might not be as important. It's not worth as much as silver, as gold, but silver is the most used currency. And that's why it's the currency compared to gold. And therefore, kanele peri letiva, again, the zahav is going to acquire the kesef and not the reverse. That's why I said in his original version, kesef konet zahav. So the perek would have been called perek ha-kesef and not perek ha-zahav. Again, the prakim always get called by the name of the first word in the chapter. Amar Rav Ashi. Now, even though Rebbi changed his mind and said in the end that zahav is konet kesef, that again, kesef is the currency always, both compared to gold, also compared to nechoshet, to copper, right? Both to something more important and something less important. But we're now going to have three statements that are going to kind of side more with, or at least try to prove the first version of Rebbi, that zahav is really the currency. Amar Rav Ashi, ki dute mistabra. Sounds more real what he said in the beginning, sounds more right. Why? Midikatani hanechoshet konet kesef. It says that nechoshet in the Mishna. The Mishna seems to fit the first reading. Why? Copper can buy the silver. Now, let's see why he thinks that proves it. If you're going to say kesef compared to zahav, the first reading of Rebbi, is the commodity, the silver is the commodity, not the currency. Because what's it telling you? It's all relative, and it's telling you the following. It's telling you something you wouldn't have known necessarily. If you say that silver can buy gold, because silver is the commodity, gold is the currency, so as compared to gold, silver is a commodity, then the Mishnah needs to tell you, but it's not like silver's always a commodity. Sometimes silver will be a currency when it's purchasing something. In other words, if the whole logic of Rebbi is chashivut, importance, so gold is a currency for silver, silver is a currency for nechoshet, for copper. And that would make sense that the Mishnah had to tell you that, because you would have thought maybe that silver is always going to be payroll compared to everything. Maybe it's a commodity. So it wanted to tell you that. But, and they're now going to say, according to the other reading, our reading of the Mishnah, that line is actually unnecessary, the one about the copper and the silver. Why? If you're going to say that silver compared to gold is currency, even though gold is worth more, the silver is the currency. So obviously, right? If you're going to compare it to gold, where gold is more important, and you're still going to say the silver is the currency. Compared to copper, which is obviously less important a currency than silver is, that silver is both more important and more used in the shuk. So, mibaya, would you even need to tell us that nechoshet acquires the kesef and kesef doesn't acquire the nechoshet, because the nechoshet is the commodity compared to kesef, which is the currency? You wouldn't need it. Obviously, if kesef is currency compared to something more important than it, of course it's going to be currency compared to something less important. To which the Gemara says, that's not a good proof. Because you can even say, according to our reading of the Mishnah, that line was necessary. Itztrich. Sakadata hamina, hani prite ba'atra desagye, inu harifet fe mikaspa. These prutot, right? There's some places, right? How many people walk around with $100 bills, right? You don't always walk around with $100 bills. You walk around with 20s, singles, $5 bills right there. They're much more usable. So maybe the prutot were much more usable in certain places. The prutot are much more the currency they use in the shuk. So, right, they're saying ba'atra desage, in a place where people more use prutot than silver, inu harifet fe mikaspa. Maybe you would think that that's then a stronger currency than the kesef, than the silver. And then emativa, you might think that in that kind of a place, that it's all depends on where you live. In that kind of place, silver would be the commodity and the choshet would be the currency, the copper. Therefore, the Mishnah had to tell you no. Because there's places where they don't really use prutot, not that much, and the silver is the main coin, we're just going to establish it across the board that silver is always the currency compared to copper, and that's why that line was needed in the Mishnah. So far, the first thing we did was to Rav Ashi tried to prove from the language of our Mishnah that it works better according to the first version, not the version that appears by us, but we rejected that. Second comment about the first reading of Rebbi. We're going to have three. Rabbi Chiya savar dava tivhavi. Also, Rabbi Chiya held that gold is the currency, meaning, right, gold compared to silver, not the way our Mishnah says, the way Rebbi said, zahav koneh kesef. I'm sorry, kesef koneh zahav. The kesef would be the commodity, the gold would be the currency. How do we know this? Well, we have a story. It's actually a very interesting story, particularly for women. Rav ozif dinarim mi barte de Rabbi Chiya. Rav borrowed money, dinarim or zahav. Okay, get this straight because we're going to keep talking about dinarim, and you need to know that there's dinarei kesef, there's dinarei zahav. We're going to call the sela is what we call the silver currency, and the dinar is going to be the gold coin. He borrowed a gold coin from the daughter of, or gold coins from the daughter of Rabbi Chiya. Okay, so it's interesting that the daughter of Rabbi Chiya was loaning money. Anyway, she lent money to Rav. L'self iyakir dinari. When he went to pay back the money, the gold had gone up in value. As we know, gold could go, fluctuate. Ata l'kamed to Rabbi Chiya. I just want to point out that, right, the issue of currency is that we view currency as being more like a constant. And when things change in value, we're going to change it. This is the constant, and the other things are changing in value compared to the constant. And you can explain these things in all different ways, but that's really the way the currency is being viewed as the constant. So now, let's just talk outside the story for a minute. If I loan you, you need to know some basic facts about loaning and interest. I told you we touch on interest today. If I loan you money, loan you $100, you give me back $100. It doesn't matter if there's inflation or deflation and the value of the dollar has changed. It doesn't make a difference because I gave you money and you're giving me money back, and that's allowed. If I give you $100, you can't give me $105 back because that's interest. But if you give me $100 that's now worth more, that's okay. But that's only going to be okay if it's currency. If it's money that's not currency, and we view the money as a commodity, like let's say we say gold is a commodity, then you're not going to be able to return to me gold. Why? This is what we call loaning se'ah b'se'ah. If I loan you wheat, a se'ah of wheat, and you pay me back, I loan you a pound of wheat, and you pay me back a pound of wheat, we don't do that kind of thing. You will not be able to pay me back in a pound of wheat because the pound of wheat changes all the time. And it could come to an interest problem. So we don't allow people to loan out wheat for wheat. Okay, there's a unique case where you can do it, and the Gemara will get to this right now, so I'll just introduce it outside. If I loan you wheat, and I have wheat at home, now why would I borrow wheat if I have wheat at home? Well, maybe I need more wheat, okay, but perhaps it's locked up in my storehouse, and my daughter has the key, and I can't find her, so I need wheat now. And then I borrow the wheat, and I tell you, but I have wheat at home, and I'm giving you rights to that wheat right now. At that point, we're locking into the price today, and then therefore there's no worry about interest, because it's as if the wheat in my house is kind of owned by you. Now, I believe, although we'll have to see when we get to this inside more, but I think that you don't actually have to return that exact wheat. But because it's as if I kind of gave you already, it's as if I returned you the wheat, because I told you, you can have my wheat that's in my house, then it works. Okay? So let's read the story. Rav borrowed money, dinarim of kesef, from Rabbi Chiya, the daughter of Rabbi Chiya. L'sofi yakar dinari. When he goes to give it back, dinarim went up in value. Until the kamed of Rabbi Chiya. So goes before Rabbi Chiya and he says, what should I do? Amar le'zil shalom l'tavim. Give her good, the gold dinarim, no problem. Iyamar bishlam tiva have shapir. So if you view gold as the currency, then it works because we don't care that the gold changed. It's almost like everything else changed in relation to the gold. The gold is stable. And therefore, you can return the gold because that's how loans work. Currency works. But but if it's pere, then this is se'ah b'se'ah, and you're not allowed to do that because it's like a commodity. And there you have it. Zahav must be currency, and that proves the earlier version of Rebbi. But then they say, no, because you could say, and this is what I told you before, the reason this worked was because Rav dinari havele, he had dinarim at home. And the keva the haveli dinare naaseh ka'omer, was like he said, haveni ad sheyavo b'ni, loan me until my son comes home, or ad shem samafteach, or I can't find the key to my storehouse until my, either my son comes back with the key, or I find my lost key, and then I'll give you that. But I'm already giving you rights to the dinarim that are in my house, and that's why it worked. And that doesn't prove anything about whether it's currency or commodity. I'm a Rava. Third statement about this. Hi tanna sever dava tivhavi. He's now going to bring a braita that from there you can see the author of this braita must have held also like the first version of Rebbi, that zahav is a currency. Ditanya. Beginning you won't really connect yet. Pruta sha'amru echamish monabi sari talki. We're now getting all the not all, but a few. How many prutot in nisari talki? There's 8 prutot in nisari talki. It's 1/8 of a nisar. Why do we need to know this? What we need to know is you have to betroth the woman with something worth a pruta. A pruta is valued not necessarily the prutot nowadays. Okay, let's say a penny, right? It would be valued at what a pruta was at the time they established this halacha, which was 1/8 of an isar italki. So if prutot now are worth, there's 20 prutot to an isar, we go by the original pruta value. Now this builds up. We're going to do how many, what if the Isari Taki change? Well, the Isari Taki is based on how many, right? X number of dinarim, of dinar of kesef. It's 1 in 24 of a dinar shel kesef. So the 24 Isarim in a dinar of silver. L'may nafkamina. Why do we need to know this? Let's say, and here comes in Ona'ah, Rashi says, let's say we're trading dinarim for isarim. So let's say you give me too many or too few, and then if we veer by a 6, then that's Ona'ah. Dinar shel kesef, echad me'esrim v'chamisha b'dinar shel zahav. Okay, this is a basic rate, right? One gold dinar is worth 25 silver dinarim. Okay, so a dinar of kesef is a zuz. So there's 25 zuzim in every gold coin. L'may nafkamina, l'pidyon haben. Pidyon haben is 5 shkalim in the Torah. Shkalim in the Torah is different from shkalim in the rabbi's time. Okay, it's actually double the amount of the shekel in the rabbi's time. A shekel is a sela. It's 5 slaim. Every sela has 5 dinarim. So pidyon haben is 20 dinarim. How do we establish the 20 dinarim? What if the value of dinarim changes? Well, it's all in relation to the dinar of zahav. It's always going to be 4/5 of a dinar of zahav. And the dinar zahav doesn't change. It's always going to be 4/5 of that. So the dinar kesef could change, but it's always going to be valued at 20 dinarim of kesef when a dinar of zahav is worth 25 dinarim of kesef. So if you say it's the gold is the currency, the gold is the currency, mishar tanna b'midi dekitz. Then the tanna is assessing, right, is comparing things to the object that is stable, that is fixed, which makes a lot of sense. But iyamar perav, if you're saying the gold is a commodity, mishar tanna b'midi de'okir v'zol, you're not going to compare it, right? The end game is not going to be the item that fluctuates. It makes no sense. You can't say, right, it's 25 dinarim, whatever gold is, that'll affect what silver is. No, it's saying whatever silver is, right, the silver will fluctuate, but it'll always be compared to this rate, the 25 dinarim of kesef. So the dinar could change in value, but the pidyon haben rate is always going to be what the 20, just like we said with the pruta, what the pruta was then, what the dinar was then, okay? Because that will fluctuate, but the gold stays the same. And if you say it goes by something that will fluctuate, zimnin de bahadr lekana, but zimnin de mosif la'iu lekana. Okay, this is a weird line, hard to understand, different, varying interpretations. Rashi claims we're talking about if someone were to give the Kohen 1 dinar of zahav, and the Kohen has to give change. So what kind of change does the Kohen give? Right? So it's going to be based on, it's always going to be 4/5 of this dinar of zahav. If it changes, sometimes you'll end up giving 10 dinarim back, sometimes you'll give 20 dinarim back. It will create this confusion. Again, what exactly the problem is a good question. The real issue is that if you look at this braita, and the reason why the braita seems to indicate zahav is the currency is because it keeps building up. This is that, and that compared to that, and that compared to that, and the end game is the zahav. And the pidyon haben is based on this fixed rate of 20 dinarim of zahav to the zahav. Ela shmamina tiva have. So from there, it really sounds like tiva have shmamina. This actually really did prove it. The other 2 attempts were off, but even though we proved it, still, right, it's saying that braita holds that way, but Rebbi obviously didn't hold that way and changed it. We're going to end with this last sugya, which really starts out the big sugya that we're going to see tomorrow. We're going to have a machlokah Beit Shammai Beit Hillel about maaser sheni. Maaser sheni, what do? You take your fruit from your house, and then you're going to take a tithe of it in the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th year of the Shemitah cycle. It's the maaser sheni, the 2nd tithe, you're going to bring to Jerusalem. But you don't schlep it to Jerusalem, you redeem it onto a coin. So we're going to move payroll to coins, okay? What if I redeemed it on, and it says in the pasuk in the tata kesef, so it's silver. Kesef in the Torah is silver. What if I want to, let's say I have a lot of silver coins, I have 25, for example, and I want to redeem it onto a gold coin because it's easier to take 1 gold coin than 25 silver coins. Can I do that? So the Mishna says, and what we're going to do is we're going to have a big machloket. This can be very confusing because the machloket Beit Shammai Beit Hillel, machloket Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish about what the machloket is. And then to make things more complicated, we're going to have 3 different versions of what Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish said about this machloket. So we're going to have a lot of permutations here. The first attempt of understanding is the first way of understanding Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, how they understood the debate. And then it totally relates to our issue. Later, they're going to reject it and say it doesn't have anything to do with our issue. Okay, it has something to do with maaser sheni, specifically not our issue. But let's start and let's understand. We're only going to see the first version today. Beit Shammai omrim. Okay, there's a Mishna maaser sheni. Beit Shammai omrim lo yaseh adam slaim dinarei zahav. This is why I said you have to remember slaim are silver, dinarei zahav or dinarim or gold. So you took your coins, your money, your fruit, you redeemed it onto a silver coin. From there, you want to redeem it onto a gold coin. Can you do that? So Beit Shammai says you cannot do that. Beit Hillel says, Mitirim, no problem. You can do that. You can do payroll to silver to gold. Okay, now you can think about where this would connect. If gold is a currency, so you can move from one currency to another currency, but you can't do fruits to money to fruits. So if gold compared to silver is fruits, commodity, then you can't do fruits, silver, gold. So Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, Hadamar, one said the machloket is b'slaim al dinarim. The machloket is only in the case it says, which is fruit to silver to gold. To Beit Shamai, and let's understand the reasons. Beit Shammai savre kas b'tiva v'dava peri. This is going to match perfectly with what we said before. Beit Shammai is going to say, kesef is the currency. That's why you can't move, and gold compared to silver is the commodity. You can't move from currency to commodity when it comes to payroll, maaser, sheni. Because what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to go to Jerusalem and buy fruits with it, and buy whatever, produce, things like that. You can buy meat. But you can't do that outside Jerusalem, right? You have to, so you can't buy fruits with the money. It has to be buying another currency. V'tiva peri lo mechalelin. You can't go coins to fruit. Ubeit Hillel savre, you can do it. Why? Because he holds the opposite. Kaspa peri v'dave tiva. Kesef is the commodity compared to gold. So you can go, right, from fruits to silver, because silver is the currency, but when it's compared to gold, gold is the currency. So you can go from silver to gold. Uperi ativa mechalelinan. You can do that. Ava, but Peirot al dinarim divrei kol mechalalim. What if you want to go straight from fruits to gold coins? You allowed to do that? Everyone, according to the first version, everyone would think you could do that. My timer, midi dehave kesef lebeit Hillel. Just like for Beit Hillel, kesef compared to gold might be a commodity, but compared to peirot, of course you could do peirot onto silver. How do we know that? Because the pasuk says you could do peirot onto silver. So it's all relative. Okay. Therefore, so let's read it. Kesef lebeit Hillel, this is just an explanation. Even though kesef compared to gold is a commodity, but legabe pere, but as compared to fruits, obviously kesef is going to be the currency. It's all relative. So zahav nami lebeit Shamai. So we'll say the same thing for Beit Shammai. Even though you can't go fruit, silver, gold, you can go fruit to gold. Okay? Because gold is only relatively not a currency compared to silver, but compared to fruits, of course it is. That's the first reading. So afagav de legabe kasba peri, even though compared to silver it's a peri, legabe peri compared to peri it's a matbeh. That's one. Okay, we don't know who said what. Reish Lakish or Rabbi Yochanan. The other one says no. They have the same argument. Beit Shammai, who says you can't do fruit to silver to gold, also says you can't do fruit to gold. Gold is just not a currency. According to Beit Shammai. According to Beit Hillel, it obviously works because you can do it silver to gold. Obviously, you could do payroll to gold. Uleman Damar, I did in the chart, and then you see exactly where this machloket is between the first version and the second. Lemanda Amar bepayroll al dinari machloket. Now we're just going to have a side question. We'll answer that question with that. We'll finish for today. The next thing is going to be to try to figure out who said what. That's going to be the beginning of tomorrow's daf, or very end of today's. Now they say, okay, if you're going to say the second version, that payroll al dinari machloket, that the machloket is also slaim al dinarim and also payroll al dinarim. So adamif gave us slaim al dinarim, liflog but payroll al dinarim. So why did they specifically choose in the Mishna to give the case of silver to gold? Why didn't they just say fruits to gold? If you can't do fruits to gold according to Beit Shammai, that's a bigger chiddush. Why didn't they put that in the Mishna? To which they said, because iflog but payroll al dinarim, havamina. If you had said that, what would we have thought? Peirot al dinarim, Beit Shammai says no. Beit Hillel says, oh, sure, you could do that. But you might think that when Beit Hillel says, sure, you could do that, maybe Beit Hillel wouldn't say you could do, though, fruits to silver to gold. And Beit Hillel does say that. So by saying fruits to gold, you might have come to a misconclusion about what Beit Hillel thinks. That's what we're going to see right now. Havamina hanimili peirot al dinarim. But maybe bislaim al dinarim mo dile Beit Hillel Beit Shammai. Maybe they agree. In other words, this would be changing Beit Hillel entirely from what we thought. And then maybe they agree like Beit Shammai, that gold compared to silver is a commodity. And maybe, right, the lo mechalalinan. And maybe you can't do silver to gold because gold is a commodity. And Beit Hillel actually says you can. And that's why they didn't give the example of payroll. That was just a side question on the second reading, and we resolved that. Okay, quick review. I know it's a very long daf, but a lot of new concepts. We talked about hashiva, thinking about shlichut, and then also some actions you did when you become responsible for partial, the whole thing. Then we got to zahav konet kesef, kesef eno konet zahav. What we mainly learned is that there's two different opinions about this Mishnah, Rebbi the first, and Rebbi when he changes his mind, and our version is the second, but the rabbis tried to kind of prove the first view. And in fact, but I didn't point this out, but it's obvious, is that in the last, we had three things that kind of tried to prove it. Some were rejected, some survived. This understanding of the machloket Beit Shammai Beit Hillel shows that Beit Hillel holds like Beit Shammai, because he says you can go fruits to silver to gold, because gold is currency, and that would match Rebbi the first. So it's another thing to support Rebbi the first, but in the end, we're going to basically end up rejecting this understanding of the machloket and say this has nothing to do with our topic. With that, wishing everybody Shabbat Shalom, welcome to Perek HaZahav, and wishing everybody also B'sorot Tovot, good news.